welcome to American Catholic History. If you like our podcast, be sure to give us a 5-star rating and a great review wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Noelle Heaster-Crowe.
And I'm Tom Crowe.
Today, we're talking about Daniel Rudd, who was born a slave but died a free man and one of the most important Catholics in the country. There are lots of interesting parts to Daniel Rudd's story, starting with being born into slavery.
Yes, Daniel Rudd was born in August of 1854, one of 11 children born to Catholic parents who were enslaved in Bardstown, Kentucky. The owner of the plantation was Catholic, as was the majority of the population in Bardstown.
Bardstown, one of our favorite places to visit, was actually a significant city for Catholics in the early part of the nation's history. It was the focal point of a large group of Catholic families who left southern Maryland in the 1780s and 1790s to live in a place where they could have greater religious freedom. And for many decades, they did.
But some Catholics, like the Rudd's owner, did still accept slavery as a legitimate practice, so it wasn't quite a model of a Catholic town just yet. Interestingly, while the slave-owner relationship still existed, the common Catholic faith became a point of unity between them all. It was, in many ways, a great leveler of society.
Yet later in life, Rudd wrote how in practicing his Catholic faith as a youth, he found equality among all parts of society. Rich, poor, black, white, it didn't matter. His later writings are full of this sentiment.
And growing up in Bardstown, Rudd experienced a special Catholic element. His parish was the Proto-Cathedral of St. Joseph.
Right, Proto-Cathedral, which means the first cathedral.
Right. Bardstown had been made a diocese in 1808, at the same time as Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, which always just seems interesting. We've mentioned that a lot.
I know, until you get to know the history, and then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was the most significant Catholic city west of the Appalachians.
Exactly.
Yeah, and when the diocese was formed, it encompassed the whole area of modern-day Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota, Iowa, and Missouri.
Just a little bit.
Tiny stretch.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd made weekly parish visits.
St. Joseph Cathedral in Bardstown, which was completed in 1820, was the first cathedral west of the Appalachians. So it was a significant church for a vast swath of the United States. Members of Rudd's family, going back 3 generations, had not only been regular mass goers at the cathedral, but had been sextons there, and Rudd was pleased to join in that work.
Now, we've been to St. Joseph twice while leading pilgrimages to that region. It's our Kentucky Holy Land and Bourbon Country tour, and we plan to do it again in June, so check out our website to join us on this absolutely incredible domestic pilgrimage.
We love doing this pilgrimage. The first time we went to Kentucky on this pilgrimage, we also found and stopped by the home where Daniel Rudd was born and grew up. It sat on land owned by the local school board, and it was in very bad shape at that point after decades of neglect, unfortunately. We weren't able to go inside. It was so bad, and it was demolished shortly after we were there. But we were privileged to see it in place before it came down.
Yeah.
We made a point to go there and
we did.
take a look at it.
We found out where it was. We knew it was nearby. Found out where it was and couldn't get up to it because it was all fenced in. But yeah, it was nice to see it. It was a large house with a grand porch, and just sad to let it fall apart like that. But as we saw when we were there, it was right across the street from the cathedral. So he grew up literally a stone's throw from the cathedral with its tall spire.
And it's a majestic spire, and that cathedral is rather large considering when it was built. From what we understand, when the Cathedral of St. Joseph was completed in 1820, it was one of the largest structures in the United States.
This monument of Catholicism was the spiritual home for Daniel Rudd and his family, as well as for his owner and his family. That's just such an odd thing to say and think about.
It is. But to be clear, by the time Rudd was born, the seat of the diocese had been moved 40-some miles away to Louisville. So this wasn't the cathedral any longer, but it was still an important and very large church.
A little guest appearance by Pippa there. Yeah. Exactly, and it retained a dignity that was near and dear to the hearts of the faithful of Bardstown, like Daniel Rudd. His experiences at the Proto-Cathedral and of growing up in that Catholic environment had a profound impact on his later life.
Of his baptism in St. Joseph, he later wrote in his newspaper that he was baptized in August 1854 at the same font where all the rest, white and black, were baptized without discrimination, except as who got there first.
And about receiving his first communion and confirmation, he wrote in his paper known as the Tribune, "The editor of the Tribune made his first communion there after the long course of study and instruction one must go through with prior to that event, and during the time he and all the other colored and white children sat together. And when the late Venerable Archbishop Spalding, then Bishop of Louisville, administered the sacrament of confirmation, the Tribune man knelt beside as fair a damsel as ever bowed before that rail and thought nothing of it." He was proud to say later in life that he had been all over St. Joseph Cathedral from foundation to the pinnacle without ever being told to move.
Yeah, and if I could just assert one little aside here, I have thought of that quote a number of times as we've been hearing some discussion about the use of altar rails and the importance of altar rails. And that's kind of always come back to me, the equality that altar rail gives to people.
Yeah.
So just my own little aside there. But to get back to Daniel Rudd, as we said, he grew up in slavery, and it was even known that when he was 4 years old, he was valued at $250. But again, his Catholic faith and the Catholic community in which he grew up showed him that before God, all have equal dignity.
It is said that when his mother died, she was such a respected woman that the pastor of the parish had the funeral delayed so that he could offer the Mass himself.
His early childhood and his embrace of his Catholic faith really gave him a foundation to do remarkable things later in life.
And he would need that foundation because he was about to live through, and somewhat in the center of, one of the greatest periods of upheaval in American history. Daniel Rudd was 6 years old when the Civil War broke out, and 10 when it ended in 1865. While Kentucky wasn't a site of lots of battles, it was a key border state. It allowed slavery, but declared itself officially neutral in the conflict. The Confederacy claimed Kentucky as its 13th state, but Union troops had occupied parts of it, including Louisville, from early on. Also, Kentucky figured heavily in the Underground Railroad as runaway slaves from all over the South made their way to freedom across the Ohio River into Indiana and Ohio.
At the conclusion of the Civil War, Daniel Rudd, like so many millions, was no longer a slave. He moved to Springfield, Ohio, where one of his brothers lived. Springfield is just northeast of Dayton. He attended high school and graduated, a thing which was rare for white youth in rural settings, let alone a black youth.
He went to work at a local newspaper, dedicating himself to advocating for the rights and equalities of blacks, wanting to extend into secular matters the equality that he found in Catholic ones. He participated in efforts to desegregate the local schools in the 1870s when he was in his late teens and early 20s.
And he quickly became convinced of the strong role the press could play in furthering the causes of justice, and moved to take advantage of that power.
In 1885, he set out on his own and started a new newspaper in Springfield called the Ohio Tribune. It was the first newspaper in the United States printed by and for Black Americans. Within a year, he moved his operation to Cincinnati, changed the name to the American Catholic Tribune, expanded the paper's mission, and made it a national paper.
This made it the first national newspaper owned by a black man, and the mission he gave it was grounded in his Catholic upbringing. He wrote, "We will do what no other paper published by colored men has dared to do: give the great Catholic Church a hearing and show that it is worthy of at least a fair consideration at the hands of our race, being, as it is the only place on this continent where rich and poor, white and black, must drop prejudice at the threshold and go hand in hand to the altar."
And that's reminiscent of what Father Abram Ryan, S.J., had said to James Longstreet, the famous Civil War general, after the Civil War, that in the Catholic Church, politics had to be put aside as we worship together. We talked about Longstreet and his conversion to Catholicism in another episode.
And Rudd's paper picked up important endorsements from some prominent bishops. In the masthead of every issue, he included Cardinal Gibbons, Archbishop of Baltimore, Maryland, the Most Reverend Archbishops of Cincinnati and Philadelphia, and the Right Reverend Bishops of Covington, Kentucky, Columbus, Ohio, Richmond, Virginia, Vincennes, Indiana, and Wilmington, Delaware.
And that's quite a list, especially including Cardinal Gibbons, one of the most important churchmen in U.S. history. And it wasn't just bishops in this country who knew of him and respected him. Through his travels and speaking engagements, he established confidence with, among others, Cardinal Edward Manning of Westminster, England, and Cardinal Charles Lavigerie of Carthage and Algiers, the Primate of Africa.
Those were important days for Black Catholics in America, and Rudd was in the thick of it. His American Catholic Tribune had reporters and subscribers across the country, and sometimes ran articles from Father Augustus Tolton, the first Black identifying priest ordained in the United States.
Right, and Daniel Rudd saw his paper as a way to reach out to his fellow Black Catholics, as well as to non-Catholic Blacks, hoping they might realize the comfort and power in being Catholic. He wrote, "The Negro of this country, ostracized, abused, downtrodden, and condemned, needs all the forces which may be brought to bear in his behalf to elevate him to that plane of equality. The Holy Roman Catholic Church offers to the oppressed Negro a material as well as a spiritual refuge. We need the Church. The Church wants us. Investigate, brethren." By 1892, the American Catholic Tribune was printing 10,000 copies, which were distributed all over the country.
It's important to note that the money from subscriptions did not, by themselves, fund the American Catholic Tribune. Rudd had to rely on printing other things in his print shop and on donations. Many of those donations actually came from white Catholics who were eager to help support the education of Black Catholics and the spread of the faith among non-Catholic Blacks.
The American Catholic Tribune wasn't all Rudd did to advocate for blacks in America, Catholic or not. In the late 1880s, he began formulating the idea for a national gathering of Black Catholics. The idea was twofold. First, it would be a way for many Black men to stand together and show their unity, to advocate for positive changes in society like better schooling, admission to labor unions, and other freedoms and rights. Second, it would be a way for Black Catholics to show that while they were a minority among their Black brethren, they were not as rare or as odd as they were often thought of.
Rudd wrote that it was important that their fellow Blacks realize the church's extent among them. We are hidden away, as it were. Let us stand forth and look at one another. Every colored Catholic must, at times, feel that his colored brethren look upon him as an alien and may even be told so. Our Protestant friends have false notions of us.
So he and Father Augustus Tolton, the first Black identifying priest in the U.S., brought together 200 leaders of the Black Catholic community to meet in Washington, D.C. at the beginning of 1889. They called the gathering the Colored Catholic Congress.
Father Tolton offered the High Mass. They discussed topics that included the role of women in evangelization and passed a resolution which expressed sympathy with our brethren on the Emerald Isle who, like ourselves, are struggling for justice. And on the final day of the Congress, January 4th, 1889, they were even joined by President Grover Cleveland.
Similar congresses were held in 1890, 1892, 1893, and 1894. But Rudd had to miss the Congress in 1892 because he had accepted an invitation to address the Apostolate of the Press, an organization of Catholic publishers and editors, not just Blacks, but all of them.
In his speech to that body, he spoke much of the nation's founding principles of equality, how these are fundamentally Catholic principles, and that the Catholic Church can and would play a leading role in breaking down barriers and bringing about equality.
In the Catholic Church, he said, our sacraments, rites, and ceremonies do not make any distinction or discrimination. We are all equal before the altar. He exhorted his mostly white audience to reach out to Blacks and extend the anchor chain of Catholic hope, love, and charity.
For his efforts, he was called the greatest Negro Catholic in America by a Black-owned, non-Catholic newspaper, The Christian Soldier.
The Colored Catholic Congress of 1894 proved to be the final Congress in Rudd's lifetime, as no more were organized. That same year, his American Catholic Tribune began to falter, due in part to an economic recession, and in part to competition from new rival black publications, some of them Catholic.
And I suppose that's a good reason if you have to falter. Your own model has been taken up by others who want to do the same thing you're doing.
I'd say he was doing something right.
I guess so.
He moved his operation to Detroit for more favorable conditions, but that didn't work out. He ceased publishing in 1897, and after that year, he never published again. After closing his printing operation, he took a step back from the spotlight. He moved to the South, first to Mississippi and then to Arkansas, taking a number of different jobs for the remainder of his life. He never stopped advocating for equality and never stopped spreading the joy of his Catholic faith among his black brethren.
Rudd suffered a stroke in 1932. His family brought him back to Bardstown and his childhood home after this, and it was there that he passed away on December 3rd, 1933, at the age of 79.
Which just makes it all the more tragic that house was allowed to deteriorate so much that it couldn't be saved.
I know, what a piece of history lost,
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe one day home of a saint is not there anymore.
Yeah.
He was buried at the graveyard of his parish church, the Proto-Cathedral of St. Joseph. Daniel Rudd's legacy lives on in the many Catholics who continued to struggle for civil rights for blacks throughout the 20th century. Another part of his legacy resumed in 1994 when the Colored Catholic Congress was reborn as the National Black Catholic Congress. This gathering, which happens every 5 years, continues to promote and celebrate the experience of Black Catholicism in the United States. The next one will be in 2028. Quite a legacy for a man born into slavery in 1854. This has been American Catholic History. If you enjoy American Catholic history, please become a supporter. Get information on how to become a supporter at americancatholichistory.org/support.
Also on our website, sign up for our newsletter, learn more about Daniel Rudd, see about our pilgrimages, and find other great stories from American Catholic history.
We also love the great reviews our listeners leave. Those and the 5-star ratings help others find us. You can email us feedback, questions, tips for episode topics, or other comments at feedback@americancatholichistory.org. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/American Catholic History, on Instagram at ACH_podcast, and follow us on X at ACH1513. I'm Noelle Heaster-Crowe.
And I'm Tom Crow.
Thanks for listening to American Catholic History, brought to you by the support of listeners like you.